Well, depending on where you are on the map in the United States, March has blown right in, and we are here all for it. Because that means March Madness is officially upon us, conference titles, conference tournaments, and the big dance. All while we say goodbye to a conference that has been on the forefront of women's basketball and women's sports. We're going to get into all of it today, right here on Locked On Women's Basketball.
Ogunbowale for the win.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Cheers, friends. It is Monday, March 4th. If you haven't already been doing it, it is now time to start paying attention because some of these teams we are watching are going to start to show up in your bracket. And oh, by the way, congratulations, South Carolina, the only undefeated team left in all of college basketball. Hi, everybody. I am Missy Heidrick, and thank you for joining us here on Locked On Women's Basketball today. And thank you for making us your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, thank you for being here today. Make sure you please go follow this podcast at Locked On WBB, and then you've got to get over to the Next at www.thenexthoops.com and visit all of my amazing colleagues, including the one that is with me here today, who has wrote an outstanding piece that we will talk about in just a moment. Well, we have done it. We have gotten to part 3 of the college basketball season. It is officially the postseason. March is here, and so are conference tournaments and the quest for the automatic bids into the field of 68. No one really wants to put their fate in the hands of the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee, so you've got to take care of your own business. Today, we are going west to talk about the final days of a storied conference that has been at the forefront, as we said earlier, women's basketball and women's sports in general, the Pac-12. We'll talk about Stanford, the regular season title, what's on stake in Vegas for the tournament, and then really what happens and what it looks like as we start to turn the lights out on a very storied place. Here to talk with me all about it today is a longtime women's sports and women's basketball journalist and a true Pac-12 veteran and expert, Michelle Smith. Good morning, Michelle. Happy Monday to you. There's so much happening in the world of the Pac-12 right now, but let's just talk a little bit about what has been an outstanding and a whirlwind 2023-24 season in women's basketball. One I think people maybe had thought was possible, that there was going to be some really good teams and there were going to be some outstanding players. But it seems as though there have been some newbies to the party, and it has made this an outstanding year all the way up and down.
It's been an amazing year. You were joking about people who haven't been paying attention. God, if you haven't been paying attention to this season, I don't know how to help you. I just don't know how to help you. But, and it's interesting because, South Carolina is undefeated and it's a little low pro right now, low profile, right? Because it's been a season of individual performances. We've had years where we focused on the team and what a team is accomplishing, whether it's a South Carolina, whether it's a UConn, whatever. This has been a year of, it's been the year of Caitlin Clark, surely, and surely she has most of that coming. But or all of it. But it's Juju Watkins, it's Hannah Hidalgo, it's Paige Becker's back for UConn. There are just a lot of these individual storylines, and it's brought interest to the game. It's made people really, really pay attention. And it also tells you it's the formula for bringing people to the game. They want someone to invest in. They want, people root for their teams. They'll always buy their season tickets, whatever. But when you've got a compelling individual figure, and we now have quite a few of them, it really brings people to the stands, to the games, to their television sets. And from that way, it's been an extraordinary season.
In terms of what the Pac-12 has been able to put on the floor, again, I think there were always every year in the conversation, people are going to talk about Stanford. We're going to talk about UCLA. Oregon has always been part of the conversation for many, many years. And then we go all the way back to the first day of the regular season, and Colorado kind of shocks everybody and jumps on the radar and beats LSU in Las Vegas on a neutral court. And then we were exposed, and we were given the ability to watch a young woman like Juju Watkins come on to the national stage.
And they beat Ohio State right out the gate.
Absolutely. And then all of a sudden UCLA is running up the AP poll and they're undefeated, and then nobody's paying attention, and Oregon State doesn't lose at home until late in the conference season. And it was just all of these things happening at once. And it seemed to me as though in the final year of Pac-12 women's basketball, we couldn't have asked for a better run up and down the gate, just simply because of what some of these teams have been able to do.
Yeah. And the thing about the Pac-12 is we know the heavy hitters, and the heavy hitters have done their thing. They've done their part. Colorado's had a slip of late, but Colorado's been a team on the radar all season. Stanford's been a team on the radar. UCLA. USC is back on the radar in a way that's galvanized Los Angeles market in a way that is desperately needed for the women's game. To have the second largest TV market in the country engaged in that way, thanks to Juju, is huge. And celebrities courtside and sort of that LA scene coming to USC women's basketball is great for the game.
Yep.
But the bottom half of the Pac-12 is really, really good. And we'll talk about, births and things in a little bit, but I'm going to make the argument that your Arizona, Washington State, Washington, Cal group that are all bubbling, some of them closer to the outside of the bubble than others, but they're all bubbling. I'm going to make an argument that that set of teams would do pretty darn well in the middle of the pack of a lot of conferences in this country. I'm not sure that the backside of the Pac-12 isn't the strongest back half of the conference in the entire country. And it's led to great net rankings for Pac-12 teams. It's led to great strength of schedule. And it's led to a brutal conference schedule in which, teams like Utah picked up 6 losses and UCLA has picked up 5 losses. And I mean, nobody was going to run through this conference. And Stanford came as close as anyone to 3 with 3 losses, but only had to play UCLA and USC once, right? And had to play Utah and Colorado only once. And that's how it works with the scheduling, the round robin scheduling. Sometimes you get teams and sometimes you don't, but just quality and individual talent across the conference. It's been really, really fun and adds to the sadness. Honestly.
No, absolutely. And as we look back on this season, a record-setting year for Tara Vanderveer in terms of breaking the all-time win record for collegiate coaches, men's and women's at the Division I level. And then they win another regular season title. And we say another. This is the last within the Pac-12 as it is today. And a group, it seemed as though, yet, as you said, they lose just 3 games in conference play. But there was a time where people were kind of having the conversation and saying, is Stanford floundering? Are they not going to be up to par as they were? Was there a point in time in the season where you saw something click for this Cardinal group, or was it just a steady progression? And then they have been able to put together yet another championship level season.
At the beginning of the season, when they beat Indiana really, really handily, I thought I saw their young guards playing really well, shooting really confidently. Brink and Erioffen, Erioffen is the catalyst, I think, for everything, because Brink is the given. Brink is that Cameron Brink is one of the best 2 or 3 players in the country. But Kiki Erioffen's elevation, the way that her and Brink now, she can take pressure off Brink. They play together. They find each other. They're both good passers. And it was always sort of the perimeter that was concerning me with Stanford, because, Hannah Jump can get smothered. She's one of the best 3-point shooters in the country, best in the history of the Stanford program. But if you don't have to pay attention to more than one person inside, if it's Brink and Jump, your defense looks a lot different than if you've got to do with Erioffen, Brink, and Jump.
Yeah.
And then some of those other guards get hot. Lopolo's had her shot from time to time this season. Elena Boscana Brooke Dimitri's came in and given them really good minutes. They're not super deep inside. This isn't a typical Tar team where they run these gigantic kids off the bench from the post, right? They lost bets to UCLA. That was, they couldn't bring back Fran Bolivi, who wanted to play a fifth year, but ended up at Harvard starting her medical school career. Like, they could have been deeper in the post, but they're not. So when Brink gets in foul trouble, a lot of weight goes on Erie often. And they've played, but Brink has been really, really good. She's been really good at staying on the floor. And when she's on the floor, she's ridiculous right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, I'm not surprised by Stanford's success. I just saw a little bit of a way, they had a little bit of a roller coaster. And by roller coaster, it was 3 conference losses. Like, it's never been horrible. I think the Arizona loss without Brink, to an unranked Arizona team with 7 players, like, that one wasn't pretty. But I also don't think a late season loss is the worst thing ever for a team that has title aspirations. I think that it gets your attention. And it looked definitely this weekend at the Oregon schools like that loss last weekend got Stanford's attention.
Yeah, I think you're right. And teams playing very well and peaking at this time of the year heads them straight into their conference tournament, which is what Michelle and I are going to talk about next. We are going to preview this Pac-12 tournament. They go to Las Vegas. Who has the chance to maybe hit the ultimate jackpot? But first, a message from our friends at FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams and look into the NCAA as well. Quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Hi, everybody. I am Missy Heidrick, and thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. So find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app. Well, Michelle Smith is here with me, a longtime women's sports journalist and women's basketball analyst. You know the Pac-12. You've lived and breathed this, my friend, for many, many years. This will be now, as it is today, the last Pac-12 tournament as we know it. It goes to Las Vegas. It starts on the 6th. Wednesday the 6th is the first round of games. We start Oregon, Colorado, Washington State, Cal, Washington and Arizona matchup, and then it's Arizona State and Utah. The top 4 seeds, Stanford, USC, UCLA, and Oregon State. Give me your thoughts on just what this bracket looks like, how it shakes out, and where's the stumbling block for someone? Is there somebody that bounces out of this thing and says it's time to make a run? We don't want to even put ourselves on a soft bubble or a firm one. We want to make our case, and this is how we're going to do it.
So Arizona is interesting to me at the 7 seed. Arizona's got a 34 in the net. To me, if the net rankings mean anything, Arizona's decidedly on the bubble, and with a win or 2, certainly, but with a win should get into the tournament. What is the net for if a team with a 34? What I've been struggling with is watching the fact that there's only going to be 6 Pac-12 teams in this tournament bracket, and thinking that that doesn't match the season we know the conference has had. It just doesn't for me. So I'm looking at these middle games. Arizona is going to be, they're super shorthanded on the bench.
Yeah.
But they've got, 2 fifth years on the floor and a lot of freshmen, and they know they've got to win at least one. And I think that they could be a disruptor for sure. But I also think the team that they're playing in the first round, Washington, could be a disruptor because they're such a good defensive team, and they have 3 wins over ranked teams this season, and they beat 3 of the top teams in the Pac-12, and I think that they could be a problem. I look at USC having to play the winner of that game, and then theoretically the winner of, they could end up playing the winner of a UCLA Utah. And I think USC's got a tough path.
Yeah.
Has got the toughest road
Mhm.
on the two sides of the bracket to the championship for sure. I think Colorado didn't expect to be a 5 seed. I mean, Colorado 2 weeks ago, Colorado was a number 1 seed
Yeah.
in the NCAA tournament, and now they are a number 5 seed in their conference tournament. They've lost 5 of 6. They've got to pull it back together a little bit. They'll get Oregon. Oregon's not been great. So Colorado's going to have to do what it does, and then they'll, and then theoretically they'll get Oregon State after that. But, Colorado's got they want their home seed. They want to try and play at home. They're going to have to play themselves back into that position at this point.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, because on the latest reveal of the top 16 seeds from the NCAA tournament that came out, there were 5 teams from the Pac-12 that were in that 16. Stanford, UCLA up at 3-4, both in that 1 seed scenario. You had UCLA in at 8 within their numbers, and then Oregon State and Colorado. Utah, not part of that conversation, has an opportunity, maybe depending on where they are in this and how they go. If they beat Arizona State first round, and let's say they knock off UCLA, which is not something that is out of the question,
right.
Utah could bounce themselves back up into that. The team to me that I've always found interesting and kind of been bullish about over the course of the conference season has been this Oregon State squad. I know they did not have Reagan Beers for a couple of games. She is back. Your thoughts on Oregon State going into a neutral site, not playing at home, and yet they could have a very tough matchup in that quarterfinals with Colorado if they get past Oregon?
They could. And Beers came back and played. They lost 3 of 4 without Beers. One of those was to Stanford. And the time previous that Oregon State had played Stanford, Brink wasn't there. So a semifinal between Oregon State and Stanford will be interesting, really, because neither one of them had their best player on the floor at alternate times when they played, and Stanford won both of those games. But Oregon State's a really interesting team. Scott Rook is such a good coach, and he has a lot of talent on the floor. He's got, Talia von Oelhoffen, who missed last year's tournament, but is a 4th-year junior because she was a kid that came out straight from high school during the COVID year and played half a season for free, basically. He's got Tamia Gardner, the highest recruit ever to come into that program, who missed some of last year with a blood clot situation that was super scary, but she's playing well. He's got Beers. He's got a really good freshman, Donovan Hunter. This is a good team.
Yeah.
So, it'll be really, really interesting to see, how far Oregon State can go. But, I wouldn't want to see him on the other side of my bracket in either this tournament or the NCAA tournament.
I absolutely agree. All right, let's talk about UCLA for a moment, because I know you've had your eyes on them. You've seen them, and they've ridden the wave themselves. They were had some, early success, as we said, marched their way right up to number 2 in that AP poll, even got themselves a couple votes and for the number 1 slot when South Carolina, I think, had solidified themselves as the best of the best. Lost some games, were without Lauren Betts for a while. She's back. But I think you kind of know what you're going to get from UCLA, because you have a player like Charisma Osborne and Kiki Rice. Those kids have been so good in the backcourt. To me, it seems as though this UCLA team, as their front court goes, is kind of how their postseason could go.
No question. And so it's going to be interesting when, there are a lot of really good bigs in the Pac-12. And I think that they've had, and so when UCLA without Betts, or when they've had a matchup, they could be a little bit vulnerable, in the sense that if you've got teams with good bigs, and you've got a couple of them even, right? Like, you can counter what has been, Betts has been UCLA's leading scorer, leading rebounder, but they've got, but Charisma runs things so well, and Kiki Rice, and you've got London Jones coming off the bench and hitting threes, and Jaquez, and this is a good team. So, these are all, to me, these top 4 seeds can do a lot of damage in the next postseason tournament, really. I really believe that. And, on the other side of that UCLA bracket is a US team that I didn't see as the 2 seed. You knew how special Juju was, but I just think it's interesting to me. she's got 3 grad transfers starting from Ivy Leagues who came in and have played 1 year together with Juju. And Juju is a generational talent.
Yes.
And you've got Rhea Marshall, who was a really, really, really good player. But she's got them playing together in this way that just it's a tribute to Lindsay Gottlieb being able, she's done this with transfers for 2 or 3 years now since she's been there, right? She brings transfers in. None of them as successful as this because you've got Juju and you didn't have Juju before. But to bring 3 Ivy Leaguers in and as grad transfers and pull this team into a cohesive unit for 1 year and have them play this well, I'm really I'm impressed with what USC has done. They have been, especially since they are, as special as Juju is, she is a freshman. And yet I haven't, they're riding a freshman into the number 2 seed in the best conference in the country.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just really impressed with them.
No, absolutely. And they could be looking at a matchup in the semifinals on Friday the 8th if they all advance. Sunday, March 10th is when the Pac-12 tournament champion will be crowned. We will keep our eyes on that and see who might be able to hit that magic Vegas jackpot. All right, when we come back, Michelle's thoughts as we close the book on an era of the Pac-12 and its impact on women's basketball and so much more. But first, a message from our friends at Prize Picks. Well, Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. We are the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is really simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. It's quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and enormous selections of players and stat types are what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. It now also offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this basketball season. The playoffs are coming for the NBA, and you've got the NCAA tournament, so get your Prize Picks app now. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It is that easy. Well, hello, everyone. I am Missy Heidrick, and thank you for joining us on Locked On Women's Basketball. We have been marching through the Pac-12 in terms of what has happened in the 23-24 season in women's college basketball. It has been a heck of a year with outstanding players, some new faces that have burst onto the national scene that we are going to be watching for many years to come. Stanford, the regular season conference champions. Who wins this postseason tournament title in Vegas is yet to be seen. We will know that in another week or so. But we are also, Michelle Smith, basically kind of starting to look at that panel of light switches and starting to turn off one or so as we go.
Now's the part where you're going to make me sad. Okay, go ahead.
Well, before I do that, I want to tell everybody out there listening, watching, please, I beg of you, go to thenexthoops.com. And Michelle has wrote a fantastic piece that I think is a amazing reflection on the Pac-12, on women's basketball. And sometimes writing can be cathartic. And you have been doing this for a lot longer than I have, and you are way better than I will ever be at it. But you have also looked at and watched this league, been around it, not only in the world of women's basketball, but I think just in general as it relates to women's athletics and women's sports. Yeah. Whether we want to talk about things like volleyball or softball or gymnastics or track and field, and you think about the student athletes and the women's sports names and icons that have come through Pac-12 institutions, this is not something that will be forgotten, but yet it's hard when you kind of start to turn the lights off and it gets really dim that we don't take a minute and look back on that. So talk a little bit about your reflections and what that piece and all of this has meant to you.
Yeah. So whether it's swimming, whether it's, you just go across, like the Olympics are littered with Pac-12 female athletes. And not that the Olympics are by any means the only standard. The WNBA, the NWSL,
Yeah.
those seminal women's national teams, right? The Julie Foudys and the Joy Fawcett's. And I mean, like, it's, the Pac-12 has been a breeding ground for our history in women's sports in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so, hey, I'm going to get a little emotional today.
It's Monday. We can do that.
It's so frustrating to watch it come apart like this because it feels unnecessary.
Yeah.
Feels like it didn't have to go down like this.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to split up all these teams. I mean, I think it's safe to say this group of schools isn't going to be together again.
Right.
And I will share. So the Pac-12, Pac-12 as after July 1 or as of July 1 will be Oregon State and Washington State with a 2-year grace period from the NCAA to figure out their direction as a conference. They are keeping the branding. They are keeping the logos. They are keeping the production studio right down the street from me here in the Bay Area. They have hired Teresa Gould as their commissioner. Teresa's a longtime administrator with the Pac-12, had a long career at Cal. And so they've got to figure out what the future is and what it looks like for the brand and for the two teams that are left. Mm-hmm. So what is going to be interesting is this weekend, what you're not going to see, I think, is a lot of tributes to the last. You haven't seen a lot of all-time teams because for Oregon State and Washington State, they are not trying to end this brand. Right. They are trying to keep the brand going. And I'm really rooting for them to do that because there's this hopeful heart of mine that I wrote that when football regains its sanity or somebody figures out what to do, that people could slide back into their regional conferences. I mean, it's never going to make any sense to me that Stanford and Cal are in the ACC. It doesn't make much more sense to me, honestly, that UCLA and USC are in the Big Ten and Oregon and Washington. I don't know who comes back, but I'm going to make a prediction that I'm going to say within 5 years, that conference has rebuilt itself and there may be some people who come back if they can figure out the football thing. So all of that being said, it's the Pac-12. There hasn't been a conference in this country that has from the beginning, even if the SEC is the place for softball at the moment or whatever it is, Pac-12 started all of it. Mm-hmm. And our most legendary athletes in some of our biggest sports are Pac-12, have their roots in the Pac-12. Mm-hmm. So, it's going to be, this group of teams isn't going to be together. The coaches I've talked to, even the ones on the schools that are leaving, they're not happy about this.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I can talk, I've talked to coaches whose teams are going to be in another conference next year and they're not happy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that they're unhappy about where they're headed, but they're not happy to be done.
Yeah. And I think that that's the point of also putting this into more of a global perspective, that these decisions are made sometimes in a vacuum and we know what runs the train, but yet a lot of other things get left in the wake. And what has been left in the wake is then trying to figure out what is best. You hope and to most, we hope that everyone says that they're making these decisions with everybody's best interest at heart. We know that that's the coach speak and the line. Whether that proves to be true is all to be seen. Mm-hmm. And I think you're absolutely right as you think about what has come and the athletes and such. But I also think that being on the forefront of women's basketball and women's sports in general, were also a lot of pretty darn amazing coaches that said, we want and we will be the trailblazers. We will invest in women's sports. We will invest in women's basketball. And this is what we're going to do.
And many, right. And in many sports. And when you talk about investment and you talk about, obviously, Stanford's broad investment with the largest college sports portfolio in the country. But you talk about Arizona's investment in places specifically like softball, or you talk about UCLA's had a pretty broad-based investment in their women's sports program as well.
Yes.
It's about investing.
Yeah.
It's about making a financial commitment. And it got to the point in basketball where if you weren't investing, it became patently obvious and people had to step it up. Yeah. And they did. Right. And so, Oregon State and Washington State the two teams left standing in this conference, Oregon State's really, really well positioned to continue to be a nationally elite team if recruits will continue to go and buy into what Scott Rueck is doing. At Washington State, Cami Etheridge has done it completely differently. She's leaned heavily into international recruits, and they haven't had the same transfer portal stuff that some other schools and things, but she's had a lot of success with international recruits. But she's built something that I hope looks lasting. Washington State would be in a completely different position right now if Charlize Ledger-Walker hadn't torn her ACL and been out, right? They've been 3 years in a row in the NCAA tournament. They won this tournament last year. This is we're talking about a different scenario for Washington State if Ledger-Walker was able to play. Yeah. But, it's about investment, and Pac-12 schools, and some of them more than others, and some of them for longer than others, but it's about investment. And there's always been a willing investment there that started at the Pac-12. Pac-12 started something that other people picked up in terms of women's sports. It wasn't the wave that got to the Pac-12. Pac-12 started the wave.
Yeah, absolutely. And it started on the West Coast, and I think it molded into a lot of other places. And there are 12 teams that are going to be in this Pac-12 women's basketball tournament, all of which over time have had great success, great coaches, great investment. And you see that, and it's only going to move forward. So on a happy note, I ask you this, 2 questions.
Yes.
Who do you see coming out of this bracket? Who do you see will be in the finals on Sunday the 10th? And where's the first place you're going when you get to Vegas other than to the arena?
Okay. I'm going to say Stanford and one of the LA schools.
Okay.
I'm just going to do that because I think it could be either one. And first place I'm going, I could tell you I have a reservation at Mother Wolf at the Fountain Blue on Saturday night. It's not the first place I'm going, but it's Evan Funky's Pasta Place. And I'm super excited. So.
Awesome. Well, that sounds amazing. And you absolutely, absolutely deserve it. Michelle Smith, where's everyone going to find you over the course of this week and into the NCAA tournament, my friend?
At the Next and on Twitter X, whatever we call it. Okay. But yes. And at work for a couple of days on my day job.
Okay, good.
I'm sure my colleagues would probably like me to say yes, and I will be at work for a couple of days.
But we all live in a world where we can work remotely. So things get done no matter where you are, if you're at a game or not. Let's just remember that.
True.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining me on a Monday. I so appreciate it. Have a fabulous time in Vegas. You absolutely deserve it. Thank you for all of you for listening and watching, for being here today. You can follow me at Missy Heidrick on X, formerly known as Twitter. Get over and follow all of my colleagues at thenexthoops.com and this podcast at Locked On WBB. Thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire in the free Fire TV channels app. So Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Thank you, everybody. It is March Madness. It is also my daughter's 20th birthday, so happy birthday to her. Enjoy the week of college basketball, friends.